The quantum scanner flickered with an impossible signature. Elsa stared at the holographic display, her three-fingered hand hovering over the emergency beacon. In her 42 cycles as a deep space surveyor for the Arcturus Collective, she had cataloged dying stars, mapped gravitational anomalies, and even discovered 2 habitable worlds. But this defied everything she knew about the universe. The signature was unmistakable: chemical propulsion, primitive fusion drives, and a hull composition that matched no known species in the galactic registry. Her antennae twitched involuntarily, a biological response to extreme stress that no amount of training could suppress. "Computational override," she commanded, her voice steady despite the racing of her dual hearts. "Verify scan integrity. Check for system malfunction." The ship's AI responded in its characteristic monotone. "All systems nominal. Object confirmed. Distance, 47,000 kilometers and closing. Classification, unknown." Elsa's breath caught in her spiracles. She had heard the stories, of course. Every child in the collective grew up with tales of the ancients, the legendary species that had supposedly seeded the galaxy with life before vanishing into myth. Humans, they were called, the first builders, the dreamers who walked on only 2 legs and possessed an inexplicable capacity for both creation and destruction. But they were extinct, had been for millennia. Their worlds were archaeological sites, their cities dust, their legacy nothing more than fragmentary data cores and crumbling monuments. Until now. The object on her scanner was definitely a ship. Its design was crude by modern standards. No gravity manipulation, no quantum entanglement drives, no dimensional folding capabilities. Just raw, brute force engineering that somehow held together in the unforgiving void of space. Elsa initiated a passive scan, careful not to emit any signals that might be interpreted as hostile. The data that flooded her console made her mandibles click in disbelief. Life signs singular. One biological entity aboard that vessel, suspended in some form of cryogenic stasis. The bioreadings were bizarre: carbon-based, bilateral symmetry, internal skeletal structure, a single cardiovascular pump. Everything matched the theoretical models of human physiology that scholars had reconstructed from ancient DNA samples. "This is Survey Vessel 739 to Arcturus Command," Elsa transmitted, encoding the message with maximum priority protocols. "I have encountered an anomalous object, requesting immediate guidance." The response would take hours. She was operating at the edge of explored space, where communication traveled at merely light speed through the relay network. Whatever decision she made in the next few minutes, she would make alone. The human ship was still approaching. Its trajectory suggested not active piloting but rather the momentum of centuries. A ghost ship, drifting through the cosmic dark, carrying its precious cargo across impossible distances. Elsa made her decision. She maneuvered her vessel alongside the human craft, matching its velocity with practiced precision. The ancient ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of her survey pod, and covered in the scars of micrometeorite impacts and radiation exposure. Its hull was scorched and pitted, yet somehow intact. Through the viewing port, she could see what appeared to be designation markings in an alphabet she recognized from xenolinguistic databases. Exodus 7. Her manipulator arms extended from her ship's hull, interfacing with the human vessel's exterior. The airlock mechanism was laughably primitive, but functional. After several tense minutes of careful manipulation, she heard the distinctive hiss of pressure equalization. Elsa donned her environmental suit, a precaution against unknown pathogens, and crossed the umbilical connecting the 2 ships. The interior of the human vessel was dark, illuminated only by the dim glow of emergency systems that had somehow maintained power for what her instruments suggested was nearly 3,000 cycles. The air was stale but breathable, Ice crystals clung to every surface, and the temperature hovered just above absolute zero. She moved through narrow corridors designed for bipedal locomotion, her digitigrade legs adapting awkwardly to the flat surfaces. The cryogenic chamber was located in the ship's core, protected by layers of radiation shielding and redundant power systems. Through the frosted viewport, Elsa could see him. The human. He was tall by her species standards, perhaps 2 meters in height, with pale skin and hair the color of Earth's ancient forests, a brown so dark it appeared almost black in the dim light. His features were regular, symmetrical in that peculiar way human faces were said to be. Even in stasis, there was something arresting about his appearance, something that made her understand why the ancient texts spoke of humans with such reverence and fear. Elsa examined the cryopod's control panel. To her surprise, it featured a universal interface protocol, one of humanity's legendary contributions to galactic civilization, still in use after all these millennia. The pod was functioning perfectly, its occupant maintained in perfect suspension, waiting for a destination that no longer existed. According to the ship's logs, which she accessed through a miraculously preserved data core, this was Harry Zhao, engineer and colony specialist, launched from a dying Earth on a one-way mission to establish humanity's first extrasolar settlement. The target world was designated Ross 128b, a planet that Elsa knew now hosted a thriving Valerian civilization, completely unaware that humans had once intended to claim it as their own. The date on the log was staggering, 2187 CE in the human calendar. This man had been asleep for over 3,000 years. Elsa's training warred with her scientific curiosity. Protocol demanded that she leave the cryopod undisturbed and wait for collective officials to decide the human's fate. But something in those ancient logs, the desperate hope, the courage required to launch into the unknown with no guarantee of success, touched something deep in her psyche. Humans had created the framework of galactic civilization. Their mathematics underpinned quantum navigation. Their philosophy shaped modern ethics. Their art inspired countless species across 100 worlds. And here was one of them, a living relic, preserved by chance and engineering and the cold mathematics of orbital mechanics. She made a choice that would change the galaxy. Elsa began the revival sequence. The process was slow, dictated by safety protocols that predated the collective itself. Temperature gradually increased. Biochemical systems initiated. Neural activity began to register on her scanners. Hours passed in tense silence as she monitored the human's vital signs, ready to abort at the first sign of cellular damage. Finally, Harry Zhao opened his eyes. They were blue, a color Elsa had only seen in images of Earth's oceans, and filled with confusion that rapidly shifted to alarm as he registered her alien form standing over his pod. "Easy," Elsa said in perfectly reconstructed English, her translator converting her thoughts into sounds that human vocal cords could produce. "You're safe. My name is Elsa. Explaining what I am might take a while." Harry tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. Elsa quickly provided water from her ship's supplies, modified to match human physiological requirements based on the data she had extracted from his vessel. After several attempts, Harry managed to croak out a question: "How long?" Elsa's antennae drooped, a gesture of sympathy that he couldn't possibly interpret. 3,147 years. I'm sorry." The color drained from Harry's face. He looked around the chamber at Elsa, at the unfamiliar equipment she had brought aboard, and she could see the precise moment when the full weight of temporal displacement settled upon him. "Earth," he whispered. "Gone, I'm sorry, your species. You're the only human I've ever encountered alive. As far as we know, you might be the last." But even as she spoke those words, Elsa was formulating plans. The collective xenoarchaeologists would give anything to study a living human. The Council of Worlds would declare him a treasure of galactic heritage. And Harry Zhao, engineer, colonist, last human, would have choices to make about what his resurrection meant for both his own legacy and the species that had built civilization in humanity's wake. The scanner that had detected his ship continued its rhythmic sweep of the surrounding space, searching for other impossibilities in the infinite dark. Some legends, Elsa reflected, were simply truths waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows of history. And in the cold equations of space and time, sometimes the impossible became merely improbable. Then improbable became real. Harry Zhao sat up slowly in his cryopod, a relic of a dead species meeting the universe that humanity had never lived to see. A universe that nonetheless bore their fingerprints on every star chart, every mathematical theorem, every dream of what lay beyond the darkness. "Tell me everything," Harry said, his voice growing stronger. "Tell me what became of the galaxy we tried to reach." And Elsa, surveyor of the Arcturus Collective, began to speak of civilizations built on human foundations, of a galaxy transformed by the legacy of dreamers who had dared to cross the impossible distances between the stars. And